Morning everyone, and welcome to today's webinar where we will be focusing on resilient real estate. This is something that CBRE have been looking at for some time now in a range of different contexts due to rising threats from a number of different areas of the world with regards to real estate. So resilient real estate, this is something we talk about in particular when we're looking at investment and asset management and how we can best prepare to survive periods of major disruption. And we put out quite a bit of material last year, centered particularly around natural disasters due to the rising impacts that we're seeing from global warming and its disruptive effects, which are starting to weigh on investment sentiment and investor decisions and the pricing of assets more heavily. So increasing the preparedness and awareness of threats has become a key part of ensuring the resiliency of assets from a range of different factors, but in particular from a financial aspect. And we can see that this extends into the current period we're dealing with regards to COVID-19 and the disruption that it's brought to our lives. It's a good example of an external impacts that can trigger problems for real estate investors, developers, and occupiers. And it highlights the wide range of threats that can be considered when building resiliency into real estate. What we see when we're thinking about planning for resiliency is that often prevention is better than cure. And here you can see some stats from the World Economic Forum where spending on disaster recovery is reported to be 9 times higher than costs for preventing issues in the first place. So resiliency and planning for resiliency in real estate are about trying to prevent issues occurring rather than dealing with them in the aftermath of the problem. And with COVID-19, we can see those problems immediately starting to impact how real estate is used. These are some really helpful graphs from Google which show mobility for Cambodia. So we can see that since early March, there's been a significant reduction in activity in a lot of sectors. So in retail, grocery and pharmacy, parks, transit stations and workplaces. These figures, they're not quite as dramatic as we see in some other nations. So if you look at Singapore at the moment, a lot of these numbers would be down by around 70% rather than between 20 and 40% in Cambodia. And what we can see there as well is additional pressure being placed on residential accommodation, where interactions and time spent in residential is up 13%. So these play a range of different roles impacting how real estate is being used in Cambodia. For example, if you're a shopping center landlord, at the moment, due to the fall in footfall in retail, down here by 42%, we can see that your retailers, your tenants are probably feeling a little under pressure, and the way that the mall is being used and operated will also need to change and adjust in order to ensure customers feel protected, start to bring back footfall, and deliver useful space during this period of time. Equally, if you're the landlord or owner of a condominium unit and your tenants are using their residential space more, that could result in greater wear and tear on the residential unit. It could mean greater demand for services like Wi-Fi within the residential building. Now, these changes might be short-term, but the ability of the building to react and adjust appropriately to these adjustments is critical to ensuring that the building is successful in coping with the challenges. So I'm joined today by Dan Davies. Dan is our Director of Property Management here at CBRE Cambodia. And together we're going to explore in a little further depth some of these topics and learnings around resilient real estate. We'd encourage you to ask any questions that you might have. So there is the ability for you to write Q&A and vote up any questions that you want Dan and I to focus on, and we'll do our best to answer those. So morning, Dan. Good to be sitting with you and to discuss these aspects. The first question we've got for you is, there have been some good initiatives that we've seen coming from Cambodia's private real estate sector, particularly from the property management side, which is really on the front line of the response. Can you tell us a bit more about some of those initiatives and what you've seen coming both from CBRE and also locally?
Okay, thank you, James. Slight technical glitch. There we go. So yeah, James, thanks for the introduction. So to start off with a couple of key takeaways from the recent activity over the last 2 months. I've been in some situations similar to this in the past, back in like 10 or 15 years ago, and one of the main things that's come up, or the takeaways this time, is that the power of social media, good and bad, and how do we manage information both coming into us and externally. So that's been quite a takeaway or a lesson learned there. Also, some of the good initiatives that we've had recently is that we've set up some networking amongst various chambers of commerce. So I'm involved, or the company's involved, with Eurocham and AmCham and BritCham, and they've been very informative. And I had a meeting yesterday, some very good feedback from guys in the industry and end users as well. Also, we've set up some sort of informal property management groups using social media apps like WhatsApp. So there's probably 30 to 40 of us, main property managers and business managers in Cambodia, and we sort of share information, share news, and to help each other along. So it's what the good takeaway out of this is, there's quite a good community spirit, that there's a lot of we're all in this together, whereas maybe sometimes we're a little bit competitive in the market, and this is more about, hey, how can we help each other so we can all do better, and the safety of ourselves, our tenants, clients, and also Phnom Penh and Cambodia as a whole. I've been with CBRE for coming up to 2 years, and although I'm involved with a regional group and I get global updates, times like this is when I really realized the benefits of being part of such a big group. There's people within CBRE who are paid to come up with contingency plans and various backup information. So I've been very impressed, and great support globally. Then that goes down to the APAC region, and more importantly on a regional basis. So the takeaway is we have a little group set up with Singapore, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and Philippines. So we all share this information. So as Cambodia is in a different phase compared to Vietnam or Singapore, and all those lessons learned have been passed on to us. So I've been pretty confident in our actions, and rather than having to make tough decisions, it's more about following a process. So we've got a lot of plans, etc., that we share, that we can just, if certain things go to a certain stage, we can just act on our plan rather than having to try and work out what is the best or make decisions that could be wrong. So they're the main takeaways and initiatives that we've had.
Okay, thank you for that, Dan. What do you think some of the longer term changes will be for property managers in Cambodia? How do you think this period of time is going to change the industry?
Good question. Well, I think like a lot of emerging markets, property management is not on top of the agenda for a lot of developers or end users, whether it's commercial space or residential. But what comes out of this is that you can see, let's say, experienced international developers who are coming in see property management as a pretty important part of the integrity of their building and their asset over long periods. So what I see from this coming out of this is that people are going to pay a bit more attention to property management, and also the professionalism that's provided, whether that's through it's outsourced or whether they provide that in-house. Things like preparing budgets, which is again in developing markets, the service charge and the cost of running a building is always the main issue. I would say one of the main issues and not the most important issue, which is the quality. So I think people are going to realize the importance of property management coming out of this. Having support and the right information. Also, I think is looking on the financial side, is making sure that it's budgeted properly and stores and things are in place to support any emergency or actions that come up.
Yeah, and from the occupier side, I think we see something similar coming out in terms of what occupiers are looking for and where their priorities are going to be sitting moving forward. So ensuring that the building has got appropriate plans to deal with this kind of issue is becoming increasingly critical. A lot of the rhetoric around COVID-19 uses the word unprecedented. Do you think that is actually the case for this issue, or have we seen this kind of thing before, and are we just not as prepared as we should be?
Well, it depends. I've got 20 years experience working in property management on all aspects, whether it's a consultant or a service provider. I've worked for governments. I've worked for developers. And what I would say, when they say it's unprecedented, I mean, to be honest, this is part of my training. I studied this, over the last 20 years. And as I said, companies like CBRE, we do workshops on such instances. So we're sort of ready for it. I think there was SARS and some other instances that came out within the last 10 years. So Singapore, Taiwan, and some other countries are pretty well prepared. Well, it seems like that. And they weren't scrambling around worrying what to do. They just acted their plan. And I know it's a bit of a boring rhetoric from me, but it's about acting your plan and it's not, trying to make decisions in the heat of excitement, let's say. And also by acting a plan in an emergent market where there's maybe not a lot of planning, is just to stick by your planning. I've been when this recently started evolving about 6 to 10 weeks ago, and a lot of people were sort of a bit, panicking or getting a bit worried. And he sort of just got to take a deep breath and say, okay, well, I've been in a worse situation this before, when I was in London, and it's just acting the plan and just sticking to it. And they say it's unprecedented. I'm ready for worse things. I think it's it's unprecedented for at the moment, and it's been a lot of I think a lot of media, social media in particular, which I mentioned earlier. That's the thing which is a lot different than 10 or 15 years ago. So, you could be sat in your office and then, a million people have contacted you about something that's happened and you've got no idea, and it's all social media, and that's not controlled. So that's a problem sometimes. So I think when people say it's unprecedented, I think it's a lot of, it's been built up to be a lot more than it is, although that's not to be complacent at the same time.
Okay, yeah, I think we're all starting to see that in terms of where we're sitting at the moment. Things have changed rapidly, and Cambodia has been pretty lucky so far in its impact compared with some other nations, even in the region. And our thoughts, obviously, at the moment with our colleagues in Singapore and the difficulties that they're facing. Do you see, and I think we both have a view on what's likely to change with regards to occupancy and how people will be occupying workspaces in particular over the next few months, and where their demands will sit, and how they might react to this once they start back at work full time, given that quite a few of our clients and occupiers of buildings are still working at least partly from home.
Yes, well, just to fill that in a bit, we've generally seeing, and this is within, I mentioned I'm part of a network group, and we were finding that in commercial buildings, let's say office space, let's stick with that, we were seeing occupancy, I don't mean leased occupancy, I mean actual people coming into the building, dropping to about 20-30%. So a lot of people working from home, a lot of businesses could do that. What we see going forward is, in other countries, their issue is a lot of buildings actually closed down and there's not any work going ahead. So they are seeing almost like a startup situation. So they're more concerned about resources and going, from very little resources working on a building up to, ramping it up again and starting the generators and starting the aircon. But here I don't see too much problem with that in terms of getting the buildings active again. Cambodia has been quite resilient against that. We were concerned about resources, especially when we had Khmer New Year, where traditionally a lot of people go away, and there was a bit of a lag in people coming back. But security, cleaning, and maintenance has sort of carried on. And what I would say is that quite a lot of the landlords have been a bit forgiving, or they're going through the same issues as the service providers in terms of their resources. So where you can't man up these projects 100%, but then the client understands that because they can't have 100% occupancy as well of all their staff coming back. So to get more to your point, the question, I'd see we're sort of seeing some tenants maybe in a bit of difficulty with their businesses, so they might have to downscale or walk away from some leases, unfortunately. But they want to carry on working. So, I mean, more on your side, James, you'll be looking at, I'm sure you're going to be very busy in looking at rent reductions or something to help out tenants who maybe don't have the income that they had before. So I think on the practical side is basically, I think offices that are more flexible and provide a lot more. So if they come with good flooring, with underflooring cabling, the aircon's in place, and pretty much they can set up within a few days or weeks, and it doesn't cost them a lot of money, and they got very flexible lease terms, but also flexible space that works. Then I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think it's about flexibility, not just in the building, but also in the mindset of both the occupiers, but particularly the landlords. So there's going to be there's quite a lot of space coming on the market over the next 6 to 12 months, good quality stuff as well. And I think we're going to see that the good quality buildings are going to shine a little bit more. And people are going to see the benefits of that a bit more, especially, can I take 50 square meters for 3 months and then grow? And is it going to cost me a lot of money? So I think there's some of the main differences, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see some adjustment with regards to how occupiers are meeting this challenge. And in some cases, it will come down to the flexibility of their workspace. So do they put up some extra walls and try and contain areas of their office slightly, whereas others may be looking at continuing some level of working from home with their staff. So an acceleration of some of the trends that we've seen regarding agile working here in Cambodia. And firms seem to be moving towards delivering the infrastructure that's needed for that. So there are some responses which are required from buildings, in particular regarding the technology infrastructure and ensuring that they've got a number of telecoms providers, for example, ISPs in their building, to ensure that the tenant has got appropriate access to the bandwidth that they need, which clearly the demand on those things has increased quite significantly. So as a response to this circumstance.
Yeah, so I got another point to add there, which is more about the process. So I think as people come back to work, they want to know that they're going into a safe environment. So how do we do that? So landlords that have been taking proactive measures, small measures, but on a regular basis, like disinfecting the premises, putting good procedures in place, such as cleaning the hands as you come in and temperature checks, which is standard, but they weren't before. Also with people coming back, making sure that everybody's registered. So like in some of the buildings that we have it mandatory that on every Monday or after a holiday, everyone's got to sign a declaration form to say where they've been. It's a very simple, physical analysis. So basically, have you had a cold? Have you been around anybody with a cold? Have you been to any areas that are high risk? So I think having those in place, and as a tenant going in saying, right, I'd like to see these, or demanding them, which we provide standard anyway. That's going to be a change going forward. So a little bit more caution and a little bit more from landlords knowing who's in their building and what risk is there.
Great. So up on the screen here, we've got 5 initiatives which occupiers might be looking at, or some questions that they might have at the moment about some of the challenges that they're facing with regards to the physical side of their office space and their premises. So the first one, I might not be able to move to my new premises. From an occupier side, I don't think that in Cambodia we've seen too much risk or downside on this kind of issue so far. The majority of fit outs have been able to continue. Any impact on that, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that it came up in a meeting yesterday was about getting approvals. So if leases are sort of in the process of being signed, then a lot of stuff can be done remotely, like we are now. But there is a point when CEO of the large conglomerate or global company needs to visit and sign and be present. So we're not seeing that. It's not stopping people moving. It's maybe just slowing it down a little bit. Generally, and where you say it depends on where your new office is, or sorry, your new premises. If it's in a brand new building, there have been some delays in construction, but generally they're not too bad here. Most buildings that we're dealing with, especially on a commercial sense, are still, they've got good finance and they're moving forward. Where there are some delays is in sort of the more technical equipment. So, elevators, CCTV cameras, stuff like that, which is coming in from other countries. Some of it's being installed, particularly from Malaysia. So where there's a lot of manufacturing in Malaysia and factories were closed down. So simple as getting your card access system through, they're being held up. But other work is carrying on. So a lot of the fit-out contractors and developers are being very creative in managing their schedule. So whilst one part of the work has been slowed down, they can progress on others. So they may not be able to move yet, but it's coming. So we also have a lot of public holidays. We had public holidays in April, and we got some coming up in May. And that way, in some ways, going to help in, it's going to help naturally in sort of, it's not like we're going to have maybe it's like Christmas in the UK where everyone comes back, on the 2nd or 3rd of December, and it's this mass transit. I don't think we're going to see that. We're going to see people being able to companies drift back in. So if they do have a new office and maybe not all of it's ready, then they'll be okay, because I don't think all their staff may be back. So I think there's a lot of flexibility and understanding on both sides.
Great. I think that answered quite a few of those points. So one of the questions, and I think we partly touched on this, I need to reduce risk in my office. So maybe globally, your company is following social distancing and obviously doing that as well in Cambodia, similar to how we're acting here at CBRE. So how can I do that effectively at the moment?
Well, you probably working hours, again, a lot of it being management, not necessarily physical things. That I can come on to that in a little bit. But flexible working hours, people coming in to work earlier or going later. But also, I mean, I was listening to some other things today, and challenges where people, they want to maybe keep a 2-meter distance. So we were starting to see it come here, but a lot of the corporate companies would have this in place with how their workspace has changed over the last 5 to 10 years to a very open, open plan, sort of more creative style of workplace. We think now people, what we're trying to stop is the knee jerk of, hey, I need to be in a cubicle, I need to be in a box, back to the 30 years ago. So I think, how do we manage that? I think you might be a bit more creative in terms of, again, you need good office space that you can be flexible without a lot of cost. Maybe you have different hours of working. You're going to be able to, communal space will need to be cleaned a lot more. Maybe you're going to have things like booking a desk. I'm very supportive of that, where if you're only coming in 2 or 3 days a week, maybe you book that desk, but you want to make sure that desk is cleaned and thoroughly, and maybe only come in for the morning. So stepping up those regimes, as I said, managing the premises, making sure people go through the declaration forms, and then maybe we're going to need to have more sort of creative ideas on communicating and things like that in the building. Also, managing the existing building. It's making sure security and cleaners are well resourced. That's quite a challenge in Cambodia. But what I would say is the outsourced contractors, security and cleaning that we work with, have been really good, and they have been able to man up, as we would say, and provide most of the staff that we needed. So I think managing the existing premises, the property management staff, as in sort of the supervisor upward level, they've had to sort of drop down a little bit and, you know, sit on reception for a few hours where the receptionist couldn't get in or they were away sick. So, you know, it's about people being a bit more flexible in their work as well, I think.
Yeah, thanks. I think key takeaway there, flexibility in all things at the moment is helping buildings and landlords to respond to this, as well as following structured processes, procedures, which are there to protect occupiers. So this is just an example, I think, of some of the steps that we've looked at CBRE in order to try and give a quite clear staged approach to understanding how to react to something. Any thoughts on this one, Dan?
Yes, well, what was we created this, but this is basically from a template or discussions that we had from regional team. My colleague Mark in Singapore was really helpful, and basically this is a summary of about 55 pages on what to do. I've got SOPs on opening a door. I got how to operate a lift, all sorts of things. But what I want to re-emphasize here is that when we have maybe a potential client or client coming to us with a bit of a panic state of, Dan, there's the pandemic, and what do we do? Are they going to close the buildings down? There's all these things going to happen. What if? I just said, relax, calm down. We have a what if scenario for everything. And this is just one of them. This is one of the 7 or 8 potential emergencies that can happen. So wait there. Let's just sit down for 5-10 minutes. Where are we at? We're at level 1. This is what we need to do. Okay. Right. Okay. We're at level number 2. So all basically, you know, this is just an example. I'm sure many of my colleagues around the world have got something similar adapted to where they are. But just follow the plan, and then it pretty much answers the question. All these questions, sorry, many questions are coming up about what if someone has it? What if 1,000 people have it? What if? Just follow what we've got in some format like you have in front of you, and just follow the process. And then it's not like it's not that hard to manage. And we also, the other thing that we had there was one thing that we also wanted to emphasize about the communication. I mentioned it briefly earlier about we managing the information coming in. So as I said, there's a million different sources now, and you know, our staff or colleagues and everyone around us, my wife and friends, everyone had lots of different information coming in. So it was a way of how do we manage that? Where do we get the right information from? So we set up some very good groups. I have a CBRE group. We have the Chambers of Commerce groups that I mentioned, which also gave us a route into the government. So the government are going to announce things. It's how do we get to the government first? So rather than reading it in the news, is there a source? Now that source came through the Chambers of Commerce, where they have a number of them have got very good communication links with government departments. So we would get that through. So as news was breaking, we would get the reality of what is the government going to do next. This was mainly when we had things like lockdowns and screenings and airports. You know, there was a lot of news around, but what was actually going to happen? How would it impact us? And we were able to pass this information on to our clients for their own business. So hey Dan, you know, our airport's going to close. Well, let me check. Let me check in the group, and we give some feedback. So I think there's a lot of good information sharing there. Also, controlling the information internally. So, you know, I guess a lot of people out there are all in groups. You know, we're all in WhatsApp groups and Viber groups for building management, social funds, all sorts of things. And how do we manage that? So we as a company, we said, look, can we not post things randomly? Please go through. We set up a steering committee. I mean, there's James involved with that, and Tita, managing director, and also the owners. We set up a steering committee of managing information. So rather than everyone just posting whatever they felt like at the time, whether it was, it's going to, you know, millions of people are going to die, or nothing's going to happen, or all this news going around, how do we consolidate that? So we set up our own sort of little group, 3 or 4 of us, and we're contacted 24 hours a day. So if someone came up, we say, what do we need to do on Monday morning, or what do we need to do on Friday afternoon? So a lot of managing the communication, I think, and a lot of this has been about managing communication rather than actually taking lots of action. I think the action would be managing information.
Thanks, Dan. That kind of brings us on to other threats that we're seeing or that we've looked at as part of this piece around resiliency in real estate, and trying to prepare buildings for the future, or for things that maybe are foreseeable, but we don't know when they're going to impact. And although a lot of what's on the screen at the moment are natural, the viral pandemic is something that we've added in to here, obviously, given the current situation that we're in. But turning to the other areas, Cambodia often, I think, feels somewhat insulated from a lot of this, in terms of natural disasters. We don't get typhoons, we don't have a history of earthquakes, but there are things that do impact Cambodia in particular. We're looking at forest fires or wildfires and flooding in particular, as well as some levels of high winds, and these things do need to be thought about and prepared for. Real estate investors, especially at the corporate level at the moment, are looking at preparedness plans and a property's resiliency and ability to overcome these issues and survive them, and protect occupiers and protect the investment that they've made in that building, as an indicator of how much they would pay, because they're looking at these items much more seriously as a risk to the income or the value of that building. So asking you again, Dan, because Cambodia often feels insulated from some of these impacts, do you think that can lead to a level of complacency here? And what can we do to overcome that and ensure that we're prepared for the next risk that we face?
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, I mean, so Cambodia sort of seems they're in a little bubble, but with so much development going on over the last five years, and also the next 10 years, which if you look at our reports, you see the growth and the expected growth. What that means is you're going to get a lot more people coming into countries, setting up business, living, working, shopping, having leisure. So what that means is that's going to bring a different type of risk, and also especially situations like this where travel was quite important. You know, where have you been and where have you been with type thing, but also different expectations as well. So the levels, the standards of the buildings and facilities, etc., are rising by natural demand. People demand more, but also by out of basic safety. We've got a lot more people to manage and deal with coming into airports, going on the roads, and going into buildings. So you can't be that complacent. So what I am seeing is we're seeing so quite a bit of our work is in consulting in the very early stages of design. We're seeing a lot more interest from developers and clients in, have I got the right building? Am I designing it right? Do I bother with a fire code? Do I worry about earthquake? What about terrorist activity? Do I need to worry about that? And we're saying, well, times like now, you need to have that in your contingency plan in order to attract these international clients. Whether, again, I mentioned maybe commercial, but also if it's in residential, Japanese, Singaporean, etc., their expectations are a little bit higher, especially if they're investors as well. They want to know that if they're investing, that their investment's safe. So making sure we have business continuity plans for all these instances. I mean, one thing we should put on there is about social unrest or terrorist activity. Which seems very unlikely here, but I've had that whilst I was in the UK and been in situations where we had to act those plans. So I think the standards are rising here, which is good. And as competition for tenants increases, so those standards will automatically increase as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Some other factors that we look at from a brokerage or investment perspective come down to diversification, and that can be at an asset level or at a portfolio level. So if you're an investor and you have one building, then ensuring that you've got a wide variety of occupiers in there can help you to be resilient. If you're in a building at the moment with, or you have a building at the moment with few tenants, and some of those tenants are impacted, then the impact on your asset value is going to be much greater than if you have a very diverse base of tenants in different industries, some of which will be struggling, no doubt, and some of which will be quite resilient to the economic impacts of the current situation. So diversifying your income base can be important, and that extends to portfolio level. So if you have the ability to diversify into different sectors of the market rather than just focusing on one, it can help to build resiliency into your own portfolio. So at the moment, what we are seeing is across Asia Pacific is strong performance from logistics, from assets like data centers, where there is significant demand for services, in particular cold storage, because of the demands for grocery and online ordering having increased, as well as some of the more open air style assets. So if you're building something at the moment and you're looking at what to build, having a sealed glass box maybe isn't what a future occupier would prefer. And in order to occupy that big sealed glass box, they may need additional filters or ventilation to ensure that the building is safe from what we're seeing at the moment as the issue. In terms of preferences from occupiers and visitors, we are seeing some steerage towards open air activity, so business parks, which we don't necessarily see here in Cambodia yet, but which would be low rise and more open air feeling, so people can get outside and they feel safer in that environment, and also community malls which allow that interaction with the outside, allow airflow, fresh air coming in and ventilating the communal spaces. Those have proven to be somewhat more resilient compared to maybe some of the more traditional formats. So thinking about investing, buying, developing slightly different types of assets as well, but obviously comparing those against market risk and demand to ensure that you come out with a balanced portfolio which can protect you in an instance like this. So if one of your assets, your office building, maybe isn't doing quite as well as you hoped, your logistics part of your portfolio is doing better. So I think this highlights further the need to move along that diversification road here in Cambodia, where perhaps at the moment investors are still very specialized in certain areas rather than spread across different asset types. Okay, so we've got a few questions that we will seek to answer. And please do add any other thoughts and do vote on any questions that you'd like to. So what do we think about the office rental sector is the first question we've been asked. So office rental at the moment, I think we're seeing some good moves from that market, in that there is still activity. Some corporates and local businesses are still looking to relocate, and there is interest in doing that. And I think the momentum that we saw in the economy prior to COVID-19 has sustained in some areas, and we are still seeing the need for growth from businesses. Others are more cautious, and often that is driven by a global or a regional need to conserve cash. So the local business will have been given instruction that they are to put that move on hold, and that is something that we have witnessed. What this means for the real estate sector, the office real estate sector here in Phnom Penh, is that we're likely to see slightly less take up this year than we were expecting. We were already expecting quite a significant volume of supply to come into the market during the first half of the year, and that still seems likely to happen. We will probably see some delays in terms of new supply coming, which will help to flatten what we see as a fall in occupancy rate for the market. And there's also likely to be an adjustment in terms of the rental levels that are being quoted, both because of the supply and demand aspects and the exacerbation of that caused by COVID-19 due to slightly fewer occupiers moving. But we can expect an uptick in office leasing towards the end of the year, and certainly into the first half of next year, if COVID-19 is contained by the middle of this year and the economy starts to get back on track. Anything to add?
Yeah, so sort of when the markets change like this, I think one thing that we may see is that maybe some of the larger space occupiers who normally have, let's say, a tighter budget, they're quite keen to look for some good deals now. So there's still deals around and space to be filled. So I think what we're going to see in Cambodia is people going for quality a lot more. I think and because it might become more available, I see there's going to be a hitch, over the next couple of months, but I think it will recover. I think Cambodia will recover quite quickly. It's quite a resilient sort of country, really. So they get on with stuff, and they're back to work and back to normal quite quick compared to others, I think. So yeah, I think we just I think we'll be doing okay later end of the year. We need to get out of this, whether it's May or June, when people start getting active again. But also, I guess we're quite heavily influenced by, international clients. We've got a couple of clients that just can't fly back. They want to get on with work, and they want to. We got a major fit out happening at the moment, and that's going ahead quite well because a lot of it's the preparation. but actual, them being here to occupy bums on seats is a bit more difficult, but they don't have to wait. So I think it's going to be an interesting time. What I would say is it's good because, the building owners and the property managers and the leasing guys have to, be a bit more creative, and it's not a case of here's the price, take it or leave it. It's more a case of what else can I get in my package now?
So thanks, Dan. Next question. Have you seen any changes in financing of supply and demand for property, i.e. are banks providing more or less credit? I think at the moment we are seeing demand for finance increase. Certainly there are pressures on developers and others to lend against real estate in order to either finish projects or fund their other activities. So the banks are probably being asked more for that, but the uncertainty level in the market, in particular regarding where asset prices are going to go over the next 2 to 3 months, is quite difficult to predict, and that leaves a level of uncertainty which has to be reflected in valuation reports and will be picked up by banks when they're considering lending. So we would expect the banks to be looking very carefully at the loan to value ratio they're able to provide, and being quite cautious. I think the sentiment coming out of the international organizations like the IMF and the World Bank, as well as from the National Bank, is to caution further lending into the real estate sector at the moment. However, there are other instances where we've seen good support for first-time buyers from the government. So some initiatives there, which is quite helpful in supporting the lower end of the market, and some good activity and good moves from some banks and some lenders supporting even the mid or upper tiers of the local landed property sector, which seems to be doing very well. So it's a bit of a mixed picture, but when we're looking at further investment and development activity and the funding of construction, I think we're seeing slightly more pressure from the banks with regards to the performance of those assets. In even assets which have been completed and are income generating, the banks will be having a very careful look at the performance of those assets at the moment. No. Third question, have we seen any change in international demand for Cambodia relative to other countries in the region, e.g. investor demand for Cambodia is resilient versus Vietnam? No, I wouldn't say that Cambodia is resilient compared to Vietnam. Vietnam has been on fire over the last 18 months, 2 years. It's done very well with regards to international investors, and they do see quite a lot of future in that market. What we see here in Cambodia is a more diverse range of investors towards the top end of the market, principally because Cambodia isn't really a target for institutional money at the moment, which leaves some air for other investors to come in and look at this market. We have seen a change in international demand, certainly, and that's principally because of the issues with regards to international travel. So until that starts up again, we are unlikely to see a big recovery in that sector, although some international investors will certainly still be keeping an eye on this market and are looking generally at Asia and Southeast Asia as good prospects for future growth, particularly given the level of debt that we're seeing in some more developed nations and the demographic bias which is in Southeast Asia's and Asia's favor at the moment. So some hope for the future, but I think investor demand generally will be slightly less this year for core assets, and instead we will still see good demand for anything which is well priced or where there is clear potential for increases in the future. So any land assets which are located near key infrastructure hubs or future infrastructure development are still seeing good levels of interest, and we can expect that to continue, particularly if they are well priced. Anything to add to that, Dan?
Yeah, so I was involved with a meeting yesterday with the Eurocham, and there's a good selection of people from different industries. One of the participants was from a law firm, and they're seeing some increased activity on companies wishing to set up an entity in Cambodia so that they can acquire land or assets. Mainly, they were looking at assets on the hotel sector, which was, let's say, a little bit challenged over the last 6 months, and COVID hasn't really helped that. So I wouldn't say there seems to be international investors looking at snapping up some, I don't like to use the word, but like distressed assets or lower priced assets, and probably on maybe a smaller scale. So not huge hotels or huge developments, but the boutique hotels and the plots of land, particularly seem to be around Siem Reap, where it's struggled over the last couple of months with tourism, especially, and it's been pretty hard hit now. So we're seeing. The law firm that I was talking about, they're seeing some activity on people wanting to enter and set up in order to pick up some assets, because if they're from Hong Kong or Singapore, the return on investment and the risk, is much different to here.
Okay, so we're coming towards the end of today's discussion, but I think we've got time for one more question. So we'll answer the question with regards to retail. So yes, footfall in the retail sector has dropped. Those Google mobility graphs indicate that people are going to shops 43% less than they were pre-COVID-19. So quite a big impact in terms of footfall. The retail sector, it offers a chance for innovation. So we have seen globally a trend towards what we call omni-channel retail, where retailers use a mixture of in-person, in-store formats and online formats, and mix up the way that they reach out to customers. We're probably going to see an acceleration of that. When it comes to the developer of retail space, then ensuring they have a diverse range of retailers present in their shopping center, that they are in constant communication, that they are implementing good property management regimes like disinfecting, cleaning, ensuring that people are well protected. Even in some cases, they are enforced that they wear a mask and that their temperature is checked, and that can help people to feel comfortable. When we're looking at the future and in terms of development and the change for the retail sector, there's likely to be some adjustment in terms of the retail format. So how big are the units? How big do they need to be in order to serve customers? Are they really just a storefront for more of an online presence? And therefore, do they need to be wider and less deep than what we see currently? Implementing natural ventilation and open areas can be helpful. It makes people feel safer in the current environment, and has been a trend that we've seen generally, particularly in the community mall segment, of providing more common space and allowing people the room to get away from others and have some free air. And advice for property owners who lose their tenants. Well, it's a very difficult circumstance, of course. they firstly need to check their lease agreement and the provisions which are in there to see what actions can be taken. And I think having a chat with a law firm and looking at the options that you've got are necessary. As well as that, often that would mean that you're left with a unit if you're in a commercial space which is fitted out, and that will probably need to be stripped out if it's not of great quality, or at least thoroughly cleaned, ready for future marketing. But should also be aware that we're entering a somewhat more difficult market in terms of occupiers, and there's more competition out there. So getting some advice on where the market's currently sitting, speaking with a professional from that sector, and making sure that you've appropriately priced your unit for the current situation is going to be key to ensuring that you are well prepared for what's coming and what is happening at the moment. So I think unless you've got anything to add on that, Dan, we'll wrap up.
No, just a final thing where he says, you know, what advice if you're losing tenants, and be very biased to say, and invest in property management and get a better building and get your systems in place and offer more. It's going to be a competitive market, challenging, but good. But we're all there for change. Thanks.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining this morning. Our next webinar will be on Thursday next week, so the 7th, where we'll be speaking with one of our clients about their views on the next phase for Cambodia's real estate market. So watch out for our communications on that. They'll be coming out to you all later today and over the course of the weekend and next week. So take care, stay safe. Do let Dan or I know if you've got any further questions or you want to chat. We're very open to sharing further knowledge and understanding and getting into the specifics of particular assets. So we do welcome that. But thank you all for your participation. Thank you for the questions, and have a good public holiday tomorrow. Thank you.